Greetings, flesh creatures. It is I, Megatron. On behalf of TFYLP, I want to congratulate you for listening to the most refined collected podcast on this miserable little planet Earth. Yes. Here you'll find knowledgeable fans discussing every aspect of Transformers and beyond. Now, enjoy the show while I continue my path to complete conquest of all of you miserable biological entities. Predacons, terrorize!
Hi, welcome to TFYLP, episode 593. We are live tonight. It is Wednesday, August 21st. I'm Lucas. I'm joined tonight by Paul.
Hello.
And then we have a special guest with us tonight, Alex from Blue Forge.
Hello.
So welcome. Thank you for joining us and being on tonight.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here.
So kind of the how we came up with this topic was a few weeks ago before Cybfest Northwest, we had Mike and Ben on. And, they're telling us all about the show and how neat it was. And, we were kind of looking at the Facebook page and the promotion and all that. And we kept coming back to the exclusive for the show. And we kept asking them all these questions about like, oh, well, this is a really neat figure. Like, how did it come about? Yada, yada, like down the list. And they're like, oh, well, we kind of know a little bit about it, but really Alex is the guy you want to talk to. And like, they kind of were saying this multiple times. So then we said, oh, well, we should have Alex on then to discuss this just because we thought the figure was so neat. So, I guess with that, we'll probably kind of go through, kind of how you came about, the figure, what you've done in the past, all that type of thing. But I don't know if you want to go ahead and get started and give yourself a brief intro.
Yeah, we'll start with a brief intro. I'm Alex. I'm the man behind the Blue Forge Facebook page, which is basically just a container for my custom work to share with people on the internet, friends and other people in the community. My most interesting thing to date has been the RC project that we're going to talk about mostly, but I've done a few other things that you guys can see on that page. Pretty much all 3D printed, like fully ground up designed Transformers of just a totally random hodgepodge of things that I wanted to design.
So I do want to mention, is Alex, it looks like that you're frozen on your side for the video feed, which happens sometimes. This is a live podcast, and sometimes for whatever reason it happens with Skype and all that type of thing. This happens all the time to one of our other cast members, Phil. I think if you like turn the video on and off, I think it'll will
tried that, but it booted me from the call for a second a minute ago, and I just managed to get back on, and it looks on my screen there's like two of me, so I'm not really sure what's going on.
Bummer. Well, we can still have the discussion. I don't want to.
We can talk,
yeah. Let's not. You look nice and pretty, so
great. I don't have to fake a smile all the time then.
First off, since we are looking at that still image of you, what's that shirt you got on?
That's my Cybfest Northwest shirt. It's the one from this year. It's got the RC print on it that you can't see because it's below the frozen image cut off. But this was the convention shirt for this year. Figured it was the best thing to wear while I was sitting on camera.
That's cool. It seemed like there was a lot of RC synergy with the event this year.
Yes, yeah, and I think the organizers may have mentioned this, but it was not planned. I had come up with the idea for doing the Darcy exclusive in like probably November of 2023 or earlier. And they didn't tell me that Sue Blue had agreed to come to the show until like April or March timeframe. So, am I back?
Oh yeah, you're back.
Nice. It just figured itself out. I didn't do anything.
That's so crazy. It's amazing when things work out like that. Because we were talking a lot about how hard it is to get guests and all that kind of thing. It's really, if you wanted all those things to happen, it would have been almost impossible to make them occur.
Right.
Yeah, definitely not. Like, yeah, if we had tried to plan it, it would have gone way worse.
Well, so you came up with the idea, like maybe we should. I mean, we don't have visual aids on here, but hopefully people will understand from the thumbnail what the figure is, and we can tell them where to look for it. But what exactly is the Darcy toy that debuted at? There it is. There it is.
I've got them all right there. I can also share my screen and share images if that works. I don't know if that works with you guys usually.
We can try it.
But yeah, we can try it. I don't know. We'll see.
That's a new level of technical acumen that we
right.
may not
hey, look at that!
For.
It actually worked.
Beautiful.
All right, let me move you guys up here so I can see what I'm doing. All right, yeah. So this is my big old album of all the RC pictures. This is like a decent place to start.
Well,
so yeah, this.
Lucas, we can see that, but I don't know if that's not translating onto the YouTube video.
It is.
There we go. There we go.
Yeah, yeah. Oh. No, it is.
Go for it.
Yeah, I
Just
can
a little
see
lag. Nice.
Sick. There it is.
Yeah.
Let's talk about it.
This is the toy in box. It, like, as you can kind of already tell just from the box, like it's 100% intended to be as G1 as I could possibly make it in every aspect, all the way down to the packaging art and having the window box and everything. And this box obviously is not red and black like the original G1 boxes are. That was like a decision that the organizers and I made to try and make it not a direct copy of G1 things.
Right.
We wanted to make it our own and you know, kind of skirt around the copyright stuff like third parties usually do. So all this is original, created by me, and the background art here was made by a local artist as well. And it's all Cybfest themed, of course.
That is just incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there was no G1 RC, so, you know, you don't have to worry about that. But obviously if you're using any type of official Transformers imagery, you know, that's where you may potentially get in trouble, so.
Yeah, right. Everything that's like would have been an Autobot symbol is a Cybfest symbol. Things that would have normally said Transformers say Cybfest. The Autobot is Carbot, all that same stuff. So right. Even the like Hasbro logo is just a house.
Well, and I'm curious with this, was there anything that you, I guess like how much homebrew was like the packaging and things like that? Like, did you actually have to take it to some type of like, you know, printer or factory or whatever type of thing to get any of this stuff made? Or like, are you just essentially kind of printing it at the like local FedEx?
Yeah, so the packaging was actually kind of a debacle on this one. What you see and what was sold is homebrew. It's like home printed, just like using sticky back printer paper and some generic mailer boxes off Amazon. And then I like have an arbor press and a die that I use to cut the window and, you know, glue the plastic in on the inside. So yeah, this is very much homebrew packaging. We did attempt to get this printed by a like box making vendor, but FedEx dropped the ball and the package is still stuck in like Iowa somewhere. I'll probably never see it.
Oh no, that's frustrating.
Well, that's a pretty creative solution. What you did there. I mean, it looks
it turned out nice,
super awesome. And it's like it's like a reusable box too, right? It's like a mailer that you can open from the bottom.
It's totally a mailer. You can open it and close it as many times as you want. It's not going to break. Like, and you can see inside. It's just got a flat closure. But yeah,
and the bubble, like that's crazy. Like,
yeah, that was homebrewed too. That was bought a little machine off Amazon that does like it's supposed to make chocolate molds out of plastic. Like it's the same exact thing as a thermoforming machine, like what they use to make actual plastic bubbles. So 3D printed a mold and then made that plastic bubble in my garage over here. But I did kind of want to go back to what Lucas had said earlier about there's no G1 RC. That's kind of like the whole crux of why this exists. It's like there was no G1 RC. It's like one of only a couple of characters from G1 that didn't get any sort of toy release at all, especially like such a mainstream character like RC. And so it's something that as soon as I started designing Transformers, it was always on the list of things I wanted to design and make at some point. And so it kind of slowly crept up the list until I proposed it to the organizers, and it is like a good candidate for something like this because it's so simple on a like parts count and like transformation standpoint. Being G1, it is kind of inherently easier to make. So yeah, worked out that way, that this was like a great thing to produce a very small number of to promote the convention and give people a toy they've always wanted.
And this is based off something though.
Yes.
You didn't just come up with it out of thin air, even.
I mean, most of it I did, but yes, it is based off of, where'd the picture go? I even have it in this album. It is based off of what many people will know and recognize as the, I don't have it in here, but as the prototype image that was released in the Transformers, what is it? Transformers, like, universe or something book. Transformers Generations, that's what it's called. Back in whatever, the early 2000s. And it's just a couple of pictures of a prototype kind of doll of RC that I took that and ran with it. Really what I took from that was what to get wrong. Like, we all know and love our G1 toys, but they're horribly inaccurate in a lot of ways. And if I were to have just like blank page started making an RC figure, I almost certainly would have made it look more like the cartoon than a G1 figure would have looked like the cartoon. So using that as a reference, like, really pointed me towards, not doing her shoulders the way that, this is a shitty version of this picture, not doing her shoulders and elbows the way that they showed up in the cartoon, but like covering up her elbows a little bit in the front. She had like, her backpack was in front of her arms in the prototype picture, as well as like having the face have kind of like a big chonk and chin instead of the very dainty point that she usually has in the movie was very much a cue taken from that model. Those are the most of it. And then, some line detailing and whatnot around.
Well, what's incredible to me is like, I mean, all we have is that image, right, of that original toy. And you were able to kind of retrofit, you're able to recreate it in a pretty successful, homaging way. And the transformation, like the car mode blows me away. Like, it looks so good. And just seeing the bottom and how it actually transforms, it's like I never ever wondered how that thing transformed until I saw this, and I was like, wow, you nailed it.
Yeah, thank you. The funny thing is when I was starting this and like really scrutinizing those pictures of the RC, it became pretty obvious very, very quickly that it doesn't transform, the one that they made the prototypes of. It's just two separate dolls, one in robot mode and one in car mode. So yeah, figuring out the transformation is 100% original in me, and I tried to avoid doing the exact same thing that every other RC toy has ever done, and make it G1 and interesting and simple. But yeah, the car mode looks great. I'm very happy with how both of these things turned out. I'm especially proud of how thin the backpack is. Like, it's very sleek.
I was gonna say that too, that it's pretty amazing actually that you have don't have a huge backpack, right? Because I feel like with half the Hasbro toys, that have come out with RC, is they essentially have the car on their back, and then it's just a transformer underneath. So the fact that you actually managed to like integrate the car into the figure, and obviously it looks blocky because it's G1, but that's great.
That's like where most of that came from, right? Is because it's G1 and it doesn't have to like fold her entire car off to the side to show a dainty little arm that hides in car mode. Like, this whole section doesn't need to be a backpack piece. The entire like back of the car is mostly her thighs and just like a little bit of center filler. And so like the amount of car that needs to fold away is like drastically less on this figure than on most RC figures.
Right.
It's a good one to hang out on.
So I guess sorry, go on, Paul.
I was just gonna keep us moving on this, but I'm assuming you mentioned 3D printing, and you might have said this before, but I'm just gonna ask again. So you started with a 3D model?
Yeah, totally. Let's see if it downloaded or not. Oh, no. Let me refresh this album. Yeah, so started with a 3D CAD model, which we're actually going to look at right now. Great. So like modeled it in Fusion 360 is my program of choice. This is an early model. And basically took that and then 3D printed it. Oh yeah, there we go. There's the prototype that this is based on. So you can see where I got a lot of those design cues. But yeah, then 3D printed it using an Elegoo Mars printer. So it's resin printed. I prefer resin printing just to get the like really fine detail out of it. It ends up making a toy that looks like a real toy. A lot of the FDM style printers, no matter how good you tune them, always have layer lines. And I've seen plenty of people on like various 3D printing groups produce transformers that are just as good looking as resin transformers, but they have to sit there and they got to sand every single surface down until the layer lines are gone. And that's just not something I want to do. So I deal with the stinky resin printer. But yeah, start with a 3D printed prototype. This is actually the very first prototype that we're looking at right now. And you might be able to tell that it's significantly smaller than the actual final figure was. So stretched it and
Uh-oh, did he freeze?
Oh no.
Ah, this is good stuff.
Yeah, we got to get
back.
There. Yeah, he's back.
There we go.
What happened? How much did you miss?
We lost you right when you started talking about when you said, "Oh, you might notice it's smaller," and I was gonna say, "Yes, I did notice that is smaller."
Great. Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
so I had a question. I had a question there. As someone that doesn't do a lot of 3D printing or 3D modeling, how hard is it to just simply upscale it? Like, is that just to drag and pull, or is that like, oh, I gotta do 4 hours of work? I don't know.
It wasn't a 30-second job. It was a little bit more complicated than that, mostly just because it was so late in the process. Like if I had decided that I wanted her to be a little bigger at the beginning, it would have been very little work. But it wasn't too bad. Overall, it probably took me an hour or two to stretch and make her bigger. And most of that is just like keeping all the holes circular, honestly. I can just scale the model however I want and it'll stretch and distort fine. But then all your holes are ovals. So yeah, that wasn't too bad. And I think it makes the figure like much better overall. This one felt like very dainty and fragile. So yeah, 3D print the figure. I chose to paint the masters for this one, trying to get a little bit of a better surface finish out of it. And then it moves into like kind of mold making, which is I'm sure something that you guys are probably not familiar with. Doing one-off customs, you would never bother to make a mold for something, and that's like the biggest hurdle to making large numbers of figures is learning how to make molds of stuff effectively. So I kind of start by like laying all the pieces out in an orientation that I think will produce as few bubbles as possible. I should start by saying that these are produced by doing what's called an underpour resin cast. So basically you can see in this picture pretty well that like the sprue is all these, white tubes and the parts are in there. And there's a large funnel at the top. And so you put the two mold halves together and you pour liquid plastic into the funnel, and then it flows through all the little sprue pipes and then up through each part and then out of an air vent hole. So unlike like injection molding is quite different in that you just push plastic into a mold so hard that air isn't ever a problem. They can just compress the air that's in there until it's so small that it's just gone. Whereas with this, I can't do that because I don't have a big machine that's pushing with thousands of pounds to keep this thing together and shove plastic into it. So it really comes down to making sure that the parts are all oriented to funnel all the air up to as few points as possible, just to keep it simple and small. And if you go ahead.
So so imagine that you have that where the funnel is, that's at the top.
Yes.
And there's another half and it looks like a brick, right? And you just pour it into there. So is the just the gravity of the stuff pouring in is enough to get it to then rise up through those holes?
Yeah. So the resin is pretty thin. It's not like super thick liquid. It's maybe a little thicker than milk. It's not crazy. But like the larger the diameter of these holes, the easier it'll flow. excuse me. So yeah, you can see in this picture the two halves of the mold, as well as one of the first test pulls that I did. Yeah, and how you described it is exactly correct. You just slap these two together and you stand it on edge, and then pour resin into the funnel, and it flows down and up and around.
So I have a friend that has done a few small mold things, and he has one of those it's like a small, it looks like a pot.
Yeah,
and it's like you clamp it together and it like creates pressure, right? I mean,
yeah,
is that essentially it's called a pressure pot?
Yeah, I have one too. Generally they're most available as paint pressure pots. So for if you're doing auto body work, you might need to spray paint on something, and so you would buy a pressure pot. And you can see in this picture, this like gray cylinder is the pressure pot, and so it's just a tank, a pressure vessel that I can fill with compressed air. And what that does is it kind of mimics what the injection molding process does, where it compresses any air bubbles that are in the plastic to be much smaller. It's not nearly as effective as injection molding because it's a much lower pressure, but it definitely makes a difference. So
so did you use that thing?
Yep. Yeah. So every single figure gets the molds get filled with resin, and then while it's still liquid, all the molds get put in the pressure pot, and the pressure pot gets closed and pressurized, and then it sits there for an hour while the plastic cures and hardens, and then I take it out of the pot and do it all over again.
So wow. How did you get started with this? Like, how many figures have you produced using this process? Or which is say figure, but how many different things have you made using this process?
Just the two Cybfest exclusives. I haven't done any other figures using this process. It's not cheap to use this process. The silicone used for the molds is not cheap. So I don't mold anything that I'm not gonna be able to recoup the cost of, at least. And so the Cybfest organizers pay for the materials out of their budget for the exclusives, and I haven't. It's a lot of work, so I don't make figures for anything else. So yeah, I've made two things: the wheelless jack and the RC figure. In terms of total number of figures produced, I've made about 85 figures total between the two designs.
And so with doing that, did you have an iterative process you had to go through, and where you've had to scrap a certain percentage or anything like that, or have you been able to kind of reuse some of the materials, or is essentially when you once you came through and started actually molding it, was it perfect and you didn't really have to?
No, it wasn't perfect when I first molded it. So between the first time doing wheelless jack and doing Darcy, I got much better. So Darcy is overall things went better the first time. Right. But even in this picture, I think it was actually this upper mold half. That's garbage. I threw that one away and made a new one of it because when I poured the silicone, the parts weren't quite sitting flat in this side of the mold. And so it produced parts that were a little thicker than they should have been. And so it would have made a funny step on her hood in particular was the part that was really unacceptable looking to me. So yeah, right. Otherwise I don't make multiple molds or generally don't scrap the molds. They do degrade over time though. So really small thin features like this little boss for one of her peg holes ripped off. So when I pulled the last figure to make the prototype colors one, that one no longer has that hole in the plastic, and I have to drill it by hand because this little nubbin got ripped off the mold.
Right.
And that's normal. These molds just kind of are very they're stretchy, which means I don't have to be super good at designing the parts to be molded. But that also means that they're weak, and so they'll rip relatively easily.
Right. Well, that's what I would just assume with making the figure and putting it together, that with the various tolerances for that you say that you make it and you make the mold and you're oh shoot, once I put the paint on or the clear coat on or whatever, that it may not fit together quite right. And that's why I was just kind of curious with some of those types of things where you had to kind of go back to the drawing board just a little bit to make sure that everything kind of all the tolerances are right, things are not too loose, too tight, like everything kind of fits together as you would want it to.
I think I dropped out again. Do you guys have at least voice back?
We
Yep,
can hear your voice.
we got you.
Okay, great. Perfect. I'll be frozen for a while, but that's fine. You were talking about tolerances and things not fitting together right. And yeah, you're totally right. If you had one of these in hand, you'd be able to tell pretty quickly that it's not tight. The joints in general, I designed to be agnostic to tolerances. So like, or rather, the thing that I can control quite well is the diameter of the holes. So most of the like friction in the joints is coming from the actual pin itself and not from like clamping on the sides of a part like you would see in a normal toy. There's also a lot of screw joints in this. So I'm able to just tighten the screws until they're tight enough to function. But yeah, the molds shrink a few percent. And so even if I make a prototype that's perfectly toleranced and everything is nice and tight, when I make the actual parts, it's going to be loose and floppy. So yeah, this was specifically designed to be able to deal with that. And her hips in particular are extremely loose, but I designed them such that when you collapse her hips, they kind of lock her legs in place so she can't just like topple forward like most G1s do after 40 years.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of curious about is with the design process. That's interesting how you actually kind of designed and thought about that to, you're like, okay, to design around some of the issues that you typically have with G1 figures.
Yeah, I didn't want her to be taking tumbles off people's shelves all the time. I wouldn't want that on mine. So why would I make it for everybody else?
Right. And then you also mentioned too that so Darcy is your second figure that you did, right? So you did Wheelless Jack as the initial figure last year, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like, what did you learn from the process of doing Wheelless Jack that you applied to Darcy?
Yeah, so I mean, I learned about the tolerances that I just described, how things generally don't fit together the way I expected them to. Otherwise, it was mostly on the like mold front, both on mold design and like mold usage. The Wheelless Jack figures, I think the organizers chatted about this a little bit in their interview with you guys, but the Wheelless Jack molds are destroyed at this point. The one part in particular that's completely unusable now is the face. Unfortunately, basically all of the detail of the face got ripped out of the mold. And so if I were to try to make a new part, he would just have a munched face. And that mostly happened much earlier and much more catastrophically than it, because that hasn't happened yet on the Darcy molds, even though I've made more figures of Darcy than I made of Wheelless Jack. That's mostly just because I used more release agent on this round, like basically a lubricant between the mold and the parts to stop the parts from sticking to the mold as much, so they don't pull on it as hard when I take the parts out. That was the biggest learning. Use release agent every part basically.
Do you happen to have a copy of the Wheelless Jack? Because I've seen the Darcy, but I haven't seen.
I do. I'd have to dig him out of a box though.
Oh, fair enough. No worries.
I mean, what you're describing, how do I put this? It almost seems like you lived, or in the past, I mean, how long did this take? You said November, so like we're talking 8 months, something like that. It took you to make this. And whenever people love to play armchair business person with like Hasbro, like what they're doing and like what are they doing with molds? They're gonna remold this and it's coming out soon. It takes this long to make a toy and blah blah blah. And what I hear all the time in the Hasbro interviews is they're talking like a 2-year process, but they're also managing deadlines. All they're doing is making toys. They got kind of a clockwork system, and they're using steel molds, which is it's a different story than what you're doing.
Yeah.
But what you're doing is essentially the same process, right? I mean, in a maybe in a different scale, but like fundamentally, you're making this mold. You're making the trees, the sprues, then you're taking the parts apart and putting them back together and painting them. I mean, it's pretty incredible.
Yep.
Like,
yeah.
The one-man show here is wild.
Thank you. Yeah, it's it is the same process fundamentally. It's just a vastly different level of automation, right? Hasbro's factories in China have machines that just crank out a part every second, and then it goes on a belt, and then it gets painted once every second, and then they have some poor guy sitting there assembling them all. But for me, it's all me. I am the machine that makes the part, and I am the machine that paints the part, and I'm the guy that assembles it too. Yeah, I won't take all the credit. My wife does help out quite a bit with painting the figures, which is a good amount of the work, but the molding probably takes the most amount of time for sure.
So yeah, and I've dabbled in this, like to a very lesser extent, but I have learned that you don't, maybe just to get the first one done, you go through the whole process once, but then when you're like, okay, everything's good, you do every step times 30, like in sequence, right? Like you have to make all the molds first. You're not bothering painting stuff until you're just done with the molding, all that stuff. So like, how long were you able to crank out one of these per day?
Yeah, so I can
the molding part.
About the work content here a little bit. Basically, for Darcy specifically, it takes about an hour of active time to make a set of parts, and then an hour of curing time in the pressure pot. Only got one pressure pot and one set of molds, so I just go, whatever, watch TV while that's happening. And then, so about an hour per figure with a 2-hour cadence. I can, on like a solid weekend day where I'm doing nothing else, I can make 5 figures worth of parts. And those are just blank, like, I lost my window here. Those are just like blank, unpainted, anything, kind of like the test shots that I'm showing now. And then, so do all that, spend just like basically like 1 day per weekend for 3 solid months or so is just cranking out as many parts as I can possibly make in a day. And then once they're all done, with Darcy specifically, waited all the way until the very end to bother painting anything, except for the prototype I painted ahead of time. But yeah, once all the parts are produced, then we sit down and paint everything. And you're exactly right. I'll paint all 40 of the body frame, and then all 40 of the back piece, and then all 40 of the left thigh, and then all 40 of the right thigh, in that kind of order. It's always just faster when you do the same small action over and over and over and over again, rather than doing a process over and over again. So even with assembly, I sat there and I would assemble just the heads onto the chest, and I would do all the heads onto the chest, and then all the chest head combos onto the body, and so on and so forth.
And so I want to make sure that people are aware of this. So like when you're painting, you're not putting it together. You're doing part by part, right?
Oh yeah. Yep. No, you definitely don't want to paint as a whole for something like this, because then it gets harder to paint. Like you can see in this picture, a lot of the parts are masked with masking tape. If I were to try to do that while she was assembled, I'd have to use so much masking tape. Just like the whole figure would have to be in a bag just to paint that one thing over there.
Okay, so all the blue you're seeing there, those are mask tape. So like you have to mask each one of those and try to do them the same, which is like kind of an organic process, right? You get as you do it, you get pretty good at it, and get into a rhythm. So then I'm assuming you're masking those so you can airbrush them or spray paint them.
Yeah. So some parts are airbrushed and some parts are hand painted. The things that are in blue taped are obviously masked for airbrushing. A lot of the smaller details are hand painted. The faces are all hand painted. Most of the like smaller, wrist or ankle and whatnot details are hand painted. But I'd say like at least half of the paint apps on here are airbrushed, and the other half are hand painted.
So you did actually use the airbrush?
Yep. Yeah, I used an airbrush this time. Wheelless Jack was all hand paint. There was no spray on that one.
And how did that come out? Because I always feel like airbrushing always looks a little bit better than hand painting. So
yeah, for sure. You can tell what's hand painted and what's not, generally speaking. The airbrush paint does dry down pretty thin, and we used the airbrush paint as hand painting paint for some of the applications, just so the colors would be identical. But yeah, the airbrushed stuff is much smoother, much more even, like very nice looking, and the hand painted stuff is kind of inherently a little bit more wibbly wobbly. just because of like it's impossible to make it perfectly the same thickness all the way across. We're talking like, microns, tiny, tiny little amounts you can see, especially on gloss paint like the window has.
Well, and white is notoriously difficult to paint, which it looks like you had to use a lot of white on this.
Yeah. So most of the white, anything that's like bulk white is cast in white. The only parts that are like white painted are the chest and shoulders are white paint. And yes, I have to use quite a large amount of white paint to cover up even this light paint color.
Yeah, I'm just gonna keep beating it over the head so everyone knows how much work this really is.
Just the amount of man hours. I'm like,
oh, yeah.
I feel like you're looking at it there, labor of love right there.
I mean, if you had to estimate, could you estimate how long it took to make each figure? Like if you put it all together into a solid chunk?
Not counting.
Have you even done that? It might be a painful process.
I've thought about doing it, and I've not sat down and written it down on a napkin or anything. But like, I would have to guess it's probably on the order of like 5 to 6 hours per figure, and that's at like maximum efficiency of doing everything in batches. So, and that's after probably a good 80 to 100 hours of mold making, which is after another 80 to 100 hours of CAD work and 3D printing prototypes. So it's several hundred hours total put into making just 40 figures.
I got a few more just questions that are coming to mind.
Yeah, keep going.
So like, what is your of all these steps, and each one is a separate step. Which is like your favorite or the most rewarding, other than just it's done? Like I have a finished thing. Like which do you like, the painting more? Do you like the mold making? Like which is the most rewarding part of the process?
Yeah, I mean, you already said it. Obviously, like being done and having 40 figures staring at you and then selling them to people and having them talk to me about how cool this figure is and like I've always wanted this since I was a kid and all that stuff is definitely the coolest and most rewarding part. The second most rewarding part is the first handful of figures that come out of the molds, which is these like multicolored guys up at the top. These are the first 4 pulls from the mold, which I did in random colors just for funsies. And this is
random. Those are the fembots. I mean, they
are kind of.
They just look a little different.
I think Firestar is supposed to be red, but yeah, that was kind of where I was going with it. Is this one mint green for obvious reasons, and then blue after that.
I mean, if it was G1, that's how they would have released this toy. That's how they would have done the other fembots, right? They would have just been like, "Oh, here's the blue one." That's really cool. You were able to do that.
Okay, I think I'm back.
We got you.
Yeah, I think you may be a little bit frozen, but it's fine. We can hear you.
It'll come back in a second. But the voices there, I can keep talking.
I'm calling it now. This is the best show we've ever done, FYI. Because
this is Skype dropouts.
Well, no, I'm just saying, like the content, like this is just so great.
Well, and that's the thing.
No one talks about this stuff. No one knows how all this works. I'm just like so excited to see all this. This is so cool.
Yeah. So yeah, the first handful of figures that come out of the molds is the second most rewarding part. That's when it like comes real. It's like, oh, I'm actually making toys and they look like this. They look that good.
And it's yours, really. I mean, like you created this thing.
I mean, I don't know. This kind of blows me away that you've made like 2 figures and this is your second figure, right? Like if I wanted to get into making like say if I'm like, oh man, this is gonna inspire me to make my own G1 style figure, right? Like where would I even start at something like this, as far as like, because you kind of went through the different steps you had, like as far as like doing the CAD design and doing some of the mold and whatnot. So but like, is this something where that you also are involved with some of these types of things professionally as well, and that you've learned and picked up the some of these skills throughout the years? Did you like watch some YouTube videos on it, ask a friend? Like how did you learn how to kind of go through and do this process?
Yeah, I'm totally cheating. I am a mechanical engineer by day, so I have a like pretty solid background in how to make shapes fit together and move around and stuff. So that is absolutely giving me a leg up over the typical layman Transformers fan who doesn't engineer for a day job. Lots of Transformers fans are engineers and have similar skill sets to mine. But yeah, so that gets me going on the ability to design shapes and knowing how a CAD system works to be able to use that easily. As far as like getting into making my own toys, I actually started by basically copying existing toys. So like I am a big fan of the WST, like World's Smallest Transformers line of toys that came out a long time ago, but there's only a few of them. And I just get a kick out of them being tiny. So I kind of, when my dad first got the resin printer, I was like, oh, I can make really small stuff in high detail. So I could totally make some WST versions of my favorite G1 toys. And I'm not actually sure if I posted this on Blue Ford or not, but I did do a couple of figures at the beginning where I did like an upgrade kit to the Kabaya Gum Power Master Prime, where it's like the inner figure, the smallest Optimus Prime, it doesn't really transform into a robot. He's just the container for a super head. So I took my G1 Power Master Prime and reverse engineered the small body. And that was like the first Transformer design that I 3D printed. Back even much longer before that, I had done custom work, the standard way of, slicing and dicing an existing toy and gluing styrene on it and painting it. So I had already had a base in making Transformer things. But then, started by recreating existing Transformers. And if you're looking for advice on how to start designing your own Transformer, that is like the most like impactful thing you can do is go and look at existing Transformers, take them apart, figure out how they work, measure them, like figure out how to make those shapes in your software of choice, and then try to 3D print something that already works and exists and learn from that. And then you can start thinking of all the different ways that you can make new shapes that look different.
Mm-hmm. Well, there you go. So I don't need a mechanical engineering degree, is what you're saying. I could
no, you don't.
Just buy some junkers at Cybfest and take them apart.
Yeah, I would say start with G1. They're usually pretty easy to understand and also easy to take apart. Modern figures, you basically can't even take them apart. They're all glued and swaged together. So start with old stuff, junkers for sure.
Yeah, you learn a lot about the toys by just taking them apart.
Yeah,
just by seeing like how the things work, and like when you do take them apart, it's almost like another language because it doesn't look like the thing. It doesn't look like it would turn into the thing it does because there's so many weird connectors and stuff, and everything is, the shapes look completely different when you dismantle them.
Yeah, and that's probably where a lot of people have that disconnect. Is like the shapes that you have to make that turn into a toy are not the shapes that you see when you look at the toy necessarily.
So did you design the box art as well yourself, or did I know you said the art in the back was done by someone else, but
so the art on the back of the box, the Seattle skyline with Autobot City in there and whatnot, was done by Ben Hansen, but everything else on the box was done by me. So the tech spec, the change finish graphics on the top, the art on the front that's like distorted and funny looking, all that was made by me, as well as the background colors and whatnot was easy. But yeah, the art on the front was actually kind of the most difficult part, just to try and figure out how to make a picture of this toy that looked distorted in the same ways that the G1 box art typically was. And I'm not a 2D artist. I'm a CAD and 3D printing medium type artist. So I didn't draw that. I took a picture of the actual toy, where I kind of slightly disassembled her to get her to pose in a way that she can't actually pose in, and then distorted the image using filters on my phone's camera app, So the box art was all me. Like one of the most kind of entertaining, but also really ridiculous things was recreating the tech spec. There is no RC tech spec, right? She doesn't have a G1 tech spec, so I didn't pull that off the internet or anything. I made
straight tens.
No, I pulled the actual numbers from the like TFYLP like website on RC G1 character, but the whole red and blue lines thing, I had to make that from scratch, and that was fun.
We do have a question from the chat. Are there any other characters that you would like to make as a G1 style toy?
I mean, most characters have been done. There are a couple like interesting concept art things in the world that I would love to do. Unicron obviously being one of them. That's a much larger scale project than this is.
Don't
all
right.
go down there,
I'm willing to fly out to Cybfest if you're producing that as an exclusive.
Yeah, it'll be limited to a quantity of 2.
Yeah. I think I got some ideas for you, but maybe we leave those for after the show. I don't know if we want to tell the whole world.
Yeah, I'm always open to ideas, but I reserve the right to do whatever I want.
That's always the best way to do it.
Yeah. As far as stuff I want to design, I have a ton of different things that I want to make, but they're not all G1. Yeah.
Well, I'd say you earned yourself, the ability to do whatever the hell you want, because this is like the improvement level, year over year, as I think Lucas was kind of alluding to, is like pretty substantial. Obviously your experience level, your experience level increased exponentially, I would say, from a wheelless jack to this one. So like, I'm really curious what the next one will be. Like, I think it will probably be phenomenal. And I would just like to say, as cool as this RC is, it's goofy because it's the G1 design.
Yep.
I would love to see like what you would actually make the G1 RC look like, just still keep it in the G1 vein, but like, how would you actually do that? I think that could probably be pretty cool.
Well, you mean like a modern figure of G1 RCs?
Well, like more animation accurate, like kind of like originally you said, I'm going to go G1's toy style versus actually making it look more like the cartoon.
Yeah, and like that's an interesting thing because we all have many different versions of a pretty dang cartoon accurate RC character. So like it's pretty hard to make something that's new or interesting or better than any of those offerings.
Right.
So that's kind of a good portion of the reason why I wanted to go G1, aside from the manufacturability and all the history surrounding it, is like it's something that is new, right? If I just made a recreation of Takara's masterpiece RC, but slightly different, like would we even be on this call?
Right. Well,
so yeah, I definitely want to make things that are not already available.
I mean, I just think that this is kind of crazy considering, because like I know for most conventions, obviously like a larger scale convention, they're contracting with a factory and making a run of like 500 figures or whatever it may be for a convention exclusive. I know that for so I worked with a small convention in Kansas City in the Midwest, and a lot of the stuff that we did 3D printing, but it was like very small scale, or like you'd even almost kind of like customize, take another figure, customize it, maybe make a new head, paint it differently, whatever. Like you're not like completely making a figure from scratch. Like this is the thing that just kind of blows me away, that essentially you've done the same thing as like what they would do to go through a process to make a figure. It's just that it's at a smaller scale, and like literally you could take what you did, hand it over to a factory somewhat. I mean, what and kind of like if you wanted to make your own, like if you want to make Darcy and make a 500 figures or something, that you could. You just had to contract with the factory, and obviously that's easier said than done. But like it just amazes me that at the scale that you've been able to pull off what you pulled off is kind of what I'm meaning.
Well, I think that's why he did it, because it's impressive. It's not quite as impressive to go like, hey, here's factory, take all this shit and make it for me.
Yeah,
give it to me later. Money. Yeah, it's not
no, I will say that I'm not the first person to do this. Not even locally. I got the idea basically from a guy who used to make exclusives for CybCon, the predecessor to Cybfest, that was run by my dad. So I've been a part of that convention since I can remember. And they had a couple of figures that were made basically the exact same way that I made Darcy back in the late 2000s. And one of them was a Cybertronian mode Bumblebee, and the other one was a Cybertronian Jazz. Okay. And so you can see where Wheelless Jack came from, is an homage and a nod to those exclusives that were made. And it fits right in with them. If you go to the Blue Forge page on Facebook, you can see a picture that I posted last year of the convention where I had, and you can see this year's convention photos too. I still have those figures on display. And so yeah, I was taking a leaf out of that guy's book and kind of doing the same thing that he did, though I didn't actually talk to him at all about how he did it. I learned from the internet mostly. Yeah, contracting with a factory, I would have to do a little bit of work to change the design to work with injection molding instead of this resin casting. But yeah, it's mostly just a money thing, and like how many of these are you going to make, and what are you going to sell them for, and how long do you have to do it, and how long until Hasbro shuts you down, and
right. So I mean, I guess that you guys just do some impressive stuff up there in the Pacific Northwest. So
crazy up here, just like our toys.
Well, I was at TF Nation the week after your show, and there were people talking about Darcy in England.
Damn.
Yeah.
I've seen a couple of people post on Facebook like, I'm in the UK, how do I get one? Sorry. Like we said earlier, it's a labor of love, and I don't know anyone in the UK that I love enough to make a figure for, so it's going to be for my local people, and if they choose to give one up and sell it online, that's their decision, and maybe someone else will get lucky.
Right. Well, I think that, as you said with the boxes that got lost somewhere in Iowa, I'd be a little worried if I was shipping it over to the UK, right?
Yeah, right. There's only whatever 30 of them. If you lose one, that you get the shipping insurance for that for sure.
Right. So, but yeah, no, I know. Also in the chat, I think Pismo was saying that it'd be really neat to see like a Lockdown or Drift or some of those type of newer characters, but to retcon those into a G1 style too. So
cool. I could get behind G1 Drift. That might be fun.
Yeah. I mean, that was essentially what I was going to suggest. Stuff like that. Alpha Bravo, baby. We need Alpha Bravo.
I don't even know that one.
It's the aerial bot helicopter from Combiner Wars. He became like a internet meme for a minute.
Yeah,
but yeah,
like, lost over that toy's existence.
Yeah, I think it's kind of done.
Yeah.
But yeah, some G1 things that never existed. That I can't believe that Hasbro hasn't even decided to do that yet. Like retroactively recanonize those. That you could have some fun with stuff like that.
Totally. Yeah, and the G1 stuff is like easier to make than a modern figure, right? The number of parts included in a modern Chug is 2 or 3 times as many parts as are in Darcy. So it's really just every part adds, a few more minutes to every figure.
Yeah, so I guess Greg in the chat said that Crazy Steve was the one that did the CybCon exclusive Bumblebee and Jazz.
Yep. Yeah, that's correct.
We're not familiar with Crazy Steve, but I'm sure that all the Cybfest attendees probably are.
Yeah, all the longtime attendees will know who we're talking about when we say Crazy Steve. And even before those figures that Crazy Steve had done that were fully like designed for the convention, they did several like repaint figures like you're talking about, where we took whatever Spy Changer, Scourge, and repainted him into Optimus Prime, like Laser Optimus. So yeah, they did a lot of those things, but the Cybfest convention hasn't really had very many exclusives until I've come along. They had some weapon sets, and I think that was it. Just a couple weapon sets.
Right. That's kind of what I assume. Again, the conventions that I've been involved with, the smaller ones, it's like kind of like you make some accessories or, whatever, that you're not necessarily building a figure from scratch and designing the box art and the bubble and all that kind of stuff. So.
Yeah.
The bubble brings it to another level, honestly. That I wasn't expecting that.
It's hilarious that like you're not the only one who thinks that. For Wheelless Jack, I did a bubble, and that was like basically one of the only questions that anybody asked me about Wheelless Jack was like, "Oh, how'd you make the bubble?" It's like people are more interested in the packaging and like how you made professional looking packaging than how you made a fully functioning toy.
Well, it's funny because in a mass production situation, that stuff is garbage, right? It's just
totally.
No one cares about it. But like, it's like that's a kind of accoutrement. Like if you make something yourself, like it blows people away. It's the details,
It makes it real, right? If I just handed you a Darcy in a bag, you'd be like, "Oh, that's cool." But
right.
Right.
So, the name Darcy. Where does, I mean, other than like clearly it's like a play on RC, but like, is there any other meaning there? Is there any sort of connection to anything? Where did it come from?
How do we
my questions keep freezing him. They're so dangerous. Hopefully we get them back like we have in the past.
Yeah, you just have to let the internet. The problem is that we're in the Midwest, and so it has to somehow travel.
My Skype just keeps shutting down on me. It completely disappeared that time. But yeah, we're back. Keep going if there's anything else to go through.
My question was about the name Darcy. Obviously, it's rhymes with RC, but is there any other connection, like with anything else?
Not really. It's mostly the rhyming with RC that brought us to it. It also, according to Google, was a popular name in the 80s, so it kind of dates it a little bit that way. But that's pretty much it. We talked about a couple other names. One of the ones that I think the runner-up was Danielle, as a allusion to her being headmastered by Daniel at some point in the cartoons.
Mm-hmm.
But that was it. We didn't have any crazy names to come up with. It was all boring stuff.
I was hoping it was a Smashing Pumpkins reference, but I guess it's not. Doesn't have the apostrophe there. I do like the name. I think it's good. Like it better than your other options. So, way to go. Other question: did Sue Blue?
Well, yeah, that's what
get a hold of one.
Yes, yeah, we gifted her one copy of the Darcy figure. She was very happy to receive it.
Did she understand like the gravitas around it? Because I feel like she might.
I didn't get a chance to talk with her at length about it, so I don't know for sure, but I suspect that she did. My booth was set up right across from her signing table, and right before the show opened, she kind of walked over and she was like, "Oh, it's me." So she definitely like recognized that it was a G1 RC toy. So yeah, and she seemed very happy to get it. So hopefully she understands and appreciates, and I'm just happy to have given her one of this thing that I created.
Well, she's probably signed, a lot of toys in especially in the past 10 years, with all the RC toys we've gotten. But I just wonder if, she's been involved with the brand from on a professional level for so long that all this stuff, all the minutia that we care about, like there was never a G1 RC, like she might totally be aware of that, or it just might not even be on her radar. But it would be really cool if I hope that she understands how like really special that is, that like what it represents more so than what it is. It's just really cool that she has one.
Yeah.
Like you should be proud of that.
Yeah, she took it, right? Yeah, she probably has some inkling, right? Like trying to put myself in her shoes, like back in the 80s when the movie came out and every other actor who was on the cast got a toy of their character, and she's there with no toy. It's like, oh man, like I'm not represented. So hopefully this makes up for it a tiny bit.
Right. Well, yeah, and she didn't have a toy. I mean, shoot, when did the first RC toy came out? It was
So
until
like generations.
2000. Right. I was gonna say a generation. So
2009, 2010.
Black Arachnia repaint exclusive or whatever.
Right. So
yeah.
Well, I'm trying to think if there's any other questions, anything that we haven't covered. I think we've done a pretty good job.
Well,
is there anything else you want to mention, Alex, that we haven't covered yet?
No, just if you like my work, follow the page and see the stuff that I post. I personally have a question for you guys. Like, what kind of customs have you done, and what challenges have you faced that you might want to ask me about on your stuff?
Lucas,
Paul had mentioned that earlier.
I was gonna say Paul's gonna be the one more for me. Like most of the ones that I've done, it's just like custom class figures. With painting and such like that. So I do have lots of friends who have produced figures. But usually I'm not the one actually making the stuff myself. Again, I know with the show that we've done, like we've had like we typically have done things with 3D printing, and like you had mentioned about the resin 3D printing process. So like, can you touch on that a little bit as far as like what's the difference with that compared to and again, like I haven't personally done any 3D printing myself, but like the different types of 3D printing.
Yeah, so I mean, just like a super high level, like FDM is kind of squeezing a plastic noodle out of a nozzle, whereas resin printing is a vat of liquid plastic that is cured with a light, and you cure it in the entire layer at once instead of kind of building and geez, looks like I'm frozen. You guys still hear me?
Yes. Yep.
Great. Keep on going. Yeah. So resin printing, like that's the technological difference, high level. But then like the key difference that draws me towards resin printing is the layer height. Like FDM printers they can get pretty small layer heights, but it's still like very much visible, even at several inches away. But the resin printers are extremely thin layers. They're on the order of like 0.0x millimeters. So they're extremely thin. And FDM printers can't quite get that thin. So it just produces a much like smoother and like nicer, more complete part. There are still layer lines that you can see if you print it in the wrong orientation or whatever. So if you look real close at Darcy, you'll be able to find a layer line here or there. But it's generally a much better starting point.
I've got a buddy that's really into 3D printing. It's just that's something that just kind of whizzed by me as I turned like 30, and I'm not going to learn how to do it now. But he got a resin printer, and he said that his results are really great. Like he loves it compared to some of the stuff he was doing previously that was more utilitarian. Now he's like, wow, I could actually make like a model, and it would look a statue, and it would look like a statue. It wouldn't look like it's pixelated.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, totally. That is where like resin shines, is in miniatures and models and whatnot. Anybody in the like tabletop gaming realm is going to be printing in resin and probably not in FDM unless they're making something really big. Just because of that fine detail that you can get out of resin printers. And I've seen people tune their resin printers to within an inch of their lives and make things that look like very, very good and very real. My stuff is not quite as good as that.
But I hear the drawback is it's like smelly, like it's sort of a messier process.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot more chemically and a lot less printery, for lack of a better word. It does smell. It depends on the resin that you get, and generally the stinkier the resin, the more durable it is. So like that's the other big drawback to resin, is that the plastic is usually extremely brittle. So like I don't print snap joints really of any kind. It's all screws and pins, just because you couldn't even install it if it was a snap joint, because the plastic would just break.
And when you say a snap joint, you mean like two pieces that would like use friction to get together?
Yeah, like I mean, most of the chug figures that you have use snap joints in a lot of places, but almost always the kind of bicep swivel and like knee or thigh swivel are almost always mushroom pegs, and those are a snap joint.
Okay, got it.
All joints are a snap joint. Those are all
Got it.
things where you have to stretch the plastic to put it in or take it out. Yeah, FDM can produce
everything has basically all the connections have hardware.
Yeah, pretty much.
Like a screw or a peg or like a metal pin or something.
Yeah, and you could design it to use if you also have an FDM printer, you could use FDM filament as your quote hardware for pin joints, which I know is pretty popular among Transformers 3D printers. But I personally just buy metal pin stock on Amazon and cut it with some wire cutters.
Because you're a pro.
I just like things that look like the other stuff that I have on my shelf is all.
Yeah. I mean, I think you have a good natural taste as far as this stuff goes.
Thank you. I agree.
To answer your question on my end, I mean, I just sort of jumped into doing, I'm not a customizer, but then I decided I was going to do a fake convention at my house one year with all my local Transformer friends. And I was going to
started.
Yeah, we all kept having these parties and we kept upping the ante. And then I'm like, well, I'm having an exclusive at mine. So come on, bring it. And hilarity ensued after that because I had no idea what I was getting into.
Yeah.
And I don't know anything about 3D printing, etc. But I mean, I'm somewhat artistically inclined. So I was like, well, I can take a figure and like customize it.
Yeah.
20 times. We'll see how hard that is. Well, I learned.
Yeah. Easy.
It's not easy. Even the littlest dudes. But I've tried a lot of things. 3D printing to have like a Titan Master. 3D printing the faceplate. Making a new face and putting it on the back. But like, a face sculpt is a lot of paint apps.
Yep.
A lot of miniature paint apps. It's a lot of work. So, I've learned as I went, and I'm actually right now this week in the process of finishing an exclusive for Saturday. It is not done yet.
It's okay. My Darcy wasn't done until the day before either, so you're good.
Well, that's what's going to happen. But I did finish the box today. Nice. So and I chose a blocky because I thought it would be easy. Because I was wrong. But I do my like, if I had a claim to fame is I decided I would try dyeing toys, and I've actually gotten decently good at it, and it is so much quicker than painting.
Totally.
And it's kind of fun because it's always an experiment. It's a difference. If we talked about compartmentalizing the steps, you got to dye all those parts at the same time, or you are completely screwed. Because tomorrow it just won't work the same. Like the batch will be different. Yeah, it'll be awful, or they'll melt. It won't take the dye and they'll melt instead, and you're like, half my toys don't work. So, I think we'll do a follow up on this, and I'll talk about it a little bit. But I mean, I'm way below the product. Like you are light years ahead of me, and I love hearing about it. Like I love that someone else is going through this stuff, but like in an even more intense way. It's really cool to hear about for me. So thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to ask too, thank you. Were there any other gotchas you had? So you mentioned the boxes, right? That you had where you had to kind of come up with a solution on the fly for that. Was there any other gotchas that you had with the figure where you had to kind of just like figure something out at the last minute?
No, most other things went according to plan. The boxes were really the biggest gotcha. I guess the plastic insert bubble was a little tricky because it's like the insert needed to be just a little bit bigger than the machine could handle. So it was tough trying to get that to work. And for a while, I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to make them at all in a functional shape. So I was like, trying to go buy like crinkle paper to just shove in here. Like, I don't. I don't know if I can. I don't know if I can live with that. Like the box is going to be so nice that I have to have a good insert for it. So, but managed to get it to work with finagling.
Yeah, I mean, like the process takes so long. It's not like I got to imagine you have an idea of how the process is going to go, months before you're done with it. But like,
Mhm.
there are curveballs that come in along the way,
Yep.
right? Like,
Yeah.
were there any other than? I mean, it sounds like you just described one with the plastic insert. You're like, hey, I'll just make this plastic insert. There's a little and you problem solved it. But were there any other? I mean, you already said you had to make the mold twice or fix that one part of the mold. Anything else that you just had to pivot around or didn't go as planned?
I mean, maybe the only other thing that I can think of is just the paint adhesion was pretty bad and still is. The release agent that I was using in the molds is really good at stopping things from sticking to the plastic, and so it stopped the paint from sticking to the plastic. Really hard to clean off. Turns out that release agent takes some pretty strong detergents to get rid of. So for all the people on the call who have Darcy, be very careful when you're touching her because the paint will flake off pretty easily if you haven't already discovered that. But yeah, it managed to get it to stick and still look good, but it only looks good for a couple of transformations before you'll start to notice little pieces flake off here and there.
Well, I got to imagine most people that have this thing have to realize it's more of a trophy than a functional toy, right? I mean,
yeah, it does.
Although it is a functional toy,
it'll just get scratched is all. And every transformer gets scratched to some degree with enough transformations. It's just that this one is particularly sensitive in a couple of different areas. But yeah, most people are gonna pick their favorite mode and put it on the shelf and never touch it again, I imagine.
Right.
One last thing I wanted to ask about you. You showed it a little bit, and I know we talked about, you made the box like the Cybfest box, but there were a few samples that kind of were, I think maybe just sort of like, well, I just want to make it look like a G1 box because why not, right? Was that like your personal sample?
Yeah, totally. So we'll see if my frozen Skype will let me share a screen again. But yeah, I did make a G1 replica box, which is like very, very G1 in its aesthetic. In fact, it's very much copyright infringy levels of G1. And this is just for me. I am not selling these for anybody. I've made a couple of extras for some local close friends of mine, but otherwise it's just for me, just for fun. And this was like probably third on the list of satisfying moments when I made this box and put the figure in there. It's like, oh my God, I made a G1 toy. Like it's so real. Oh yeah, there's those two.
They're not coming up, but I think that you can see them on the Cybfest.
Yeah, I was gonna say, are they on the Blue Forge or Cybfest page?
I did not post the box photos under Blue Forge. I posted them on my personal account in the Pacific Northwest group as well as the Cybfest discussion group. So if you scroll through the content in Cybfest, you might be able to find them. But also if you Google image search, you might be able to find them too.
I think the one I'm referring to, there's a picture I think of you dressed as Spike, right, at the event, at your table, and you can see it on the table. It just looks pretty cool. It's small, but
you can see that it exists.
Yeah, really neat.
Well, thank you for joining us and kind of walking through the process. It's been very informative for me because I complete noob to all this type of stuff. So I really am very interested in hearing about this kind of stuff and some of the inner workings. So it's very cool.
Yeah, thanks for having me on and listening to me ramble about making toys for an hour.
Again, I think this is like, everyone should know this stuff. This is super cool. This is like how the sausage gets made, on a microcosm level, and what you made is really special.
Thanks.
So, thank you for coming.
Oh yeah, no, we love it. This is great. So, well, thank you so much, and thank you to everybody in the chat who asked questions and everything. So, I guess with that, we will see everyone next week.
Is there a book club?
No.
No
I
book
don't know,
club.
yeah, I was gonna say there's book club, but they didn't make a post about it. So I'm sure if they do have a book club, they can post about it on the TF Talk page. So anyway, all right. Well, thanks everyone. We'll see ya. Bye.